start?
Yep.
Okay. Today in our society, we see a lot of things. We watch so many stuff that through YouTube, movie, sports, or studies, or even this lecture. We watch so many stuff. We observe so many stuff. We see so many stuff. Yogi Berra, all-time catcher for I believe Cincinnati Reds, exactly knew this and said, you can observe a lot just by watching. I think what this means that to be successful, first thing you gotta do is just watch and observe. How am I gonna go about this? Just by relating to Yogi Berra's story, how this relates to me and how our society sees this. Yogi Berra, like I say, he's an all-time catcher. He sits at the plate and observes the pitcher. One of the reasons why he was so successful is because he knew exactly what pitcher habit was, how he throws, and even the batter, he observed a lot of batters, how they swing, what ball they swing at, what their weakness was. How do you get this? Just by observing, watching a lot of videos, a lot of plays about the baseball players and their pitchers. And he was able to be so successful in that. And a lot of catchers actually practice observing the ball, how ball comes around, how pitcher throws, and the reaction to it, how batter swings, what their timing is. So I can relate to Yogi so much, how in terms of how he was so successful and how he was able to go to Hall of Fame and become all-time catcher of baseball history. A lot of his names are mentioned every time we talk about all-time catchers, and reason why he was successful is, like he said, he observed and watched a lot. And going on, how does this relate to me? I dream about being a social worker, and to be a social worker, one of the things I had to learn was that I need to be observing and I need to be careful as how I watch people. I see a lot of times the interaction, how people interact, what their struggle is, and what their story is about. And part of it is, if I can make eye contact or if I can watch that tiny stuff, then it's hard to relate to others and how I can influence them, how I can help them. It sounds easy when you observe and just watch and see, but there's a lot more to it when you just observe and just watch. And part of it is, I think, as I'm trying to be a social worker and I'm studying, I'm learning a lot. Even the speech classes, how you guys talk, how you guys gesture, the body movement, the language, the eye contact. It's something that just by watching you guys, I learn it. And sometimes I take some of it, I try to use it out at the field, or even at church, I hear a lot of stories about people struggling, and a lot of people come around and ask me a lot of stuff, and through that, I watch and observe, what they're saying, what it means to them, and even, just how they talk and what their story means to them. So just by watching, I get so many details and the deeper meanings to it, and part of it is that, I need to be, for me to be successful, just like Yogi said, I really need to just watch and observe. And lastly, how this relates to us, just a lot of people that are successful, I feel like, their life is just a whole about watching and acting and observing. I bet, Steve Jobs, I bet he observed a lot of computer science, and then I bet he watched a lot of stuff that's been coming out, the products, computer, MP3 players, and he wanted to make a life difference in our society, and part of it is that I bet those people that are successful in our society today watched a lot of stuff, observed a lot of stuff, and something they're passionate, they keep watch over and over, like the catcher like Yogi Berra too, even so. I think in order for us to be successful, we continue to have to watch and keep observing what we're passionate about, and as I'm saying today, how this relates to me, how this relates to Yogi, and how this relates to us. Part of it is that we constantly need to watch and observe what we're saying. Let me repeat again. you can observe a lot just by watching Yogi Berra. And as we're trying to be successful in our life, how much do we watch and observe of things? Because that's something I'm trying to do as I want to be successful.
Okay, I thought that you had a pretty effective thesis given the topic that you had. There's a good preview, so structurally everything is solid. In the body, the speech, you also follow that structure. That's also very solid. So all the organizational issues are in good shape. The content is developed pretty well. I thought it was a little odd that you took the first section and you treated it so literally, actually talking about Yogi Berra and those observations, but it worked okay. I mean, it would work for any catcher in this particular situation. You don't really have any Yogi Berra stories, so why you stick with Yogi Berra, I'm not quite sure. But the idea, I guess, makes sense. Yankees, by the way, not the Reds. That's okay. So that was okay. And then the same sort of thing with the second point. I think that you've got a general idea here, but you need some particulars. You need to have some illustrations to talk about it. It remains a little bit abstract. And so other than the abstractness of your supporting examples, I thought, like I said, the content was pretty good. It could be more interesting. It'll be more meaningful if you've got particulars rather than just talk about it in this sort of vague way. The presentation issues, you project your voice pretty well. I thought that you were very effective and naturalistic while you were speaking. It flows easily. There aren't any hesitation spots, anything that's particularly noticeable. Your gestures, you've got some indicators while you're speaking. They tend to be a little bit repetitive, and so maybe a little bit more outgoing indicators would be helpful. Your eye contact with the audience, most of the time you did seem to be looking up, but sometimes it did seem like the contact with the audience was through a slightly averted gaze, so I think a little bit more direct would be helpful, but it's not like you were hiding from us, but I do think sometimes that you're not always engaging us. You do seem to stay in the same spot, and it seemed to me like there would be plenty of times when you could step up to emphasize a point and maybe move from the location so you don't look quite as much like you're nailed to the one spot. And it did seem a little odd that before you got started you had to take in that deep breath like you were about to dive into the pool. All right, thank you.